and thank you for joining us for the next half hour. This podcast will be about 30 minutes, and it's not interactive other than just the three of us on the screen here. Dan Levitt is the BC Seniors Advocate, and Leanore is the Information and Referral Specialist. And we're delighted to have both you people here this morning. And thank you for your time. And more importantly, thank you for your wisdom and your commitment to what you're all about. So thank you very much. So why don't we start with the first question that perhaps a lot of people's mind. What exactly is ageism? And either way, we'll have both of you answer that. What exactly is ageism? It sounds obvious to me, but what is it?
I could start if you like. So ageism was a term that was coined 55 years ago by a gerontologist. His name was Robert Butler. He saw that in Chevy Chase, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C., he saw that people were really upset because a senior housing complex was going up. And people were really upset about seeing seniors living in their backyard in this housing complex. They didn't want this structure being built. So he looked at, well, who's going to be living there? Old people. And then he thought, why would you not want old people? And he saw it like other isms, like racism or those other, it's sexism, and he saw discrimination against older people. So it's when you stereotype, it's prejudices, it's discrimination against people based on their age. It's another form of bigotry. But unlike racism or sexism, ageism is still widely accepted in many societal situations. And it's a strange thing because we're actually fearing that future person that we will become. And there's even a psychological condition called gerontophobia, where you're afraid of older people and you're also afraid of growing older. Now, ageism is not just about how we treat older people, it's also about how we treat younger people. And in fact, in the workplace, younger people report more age discrimination than older people do. So ageism is a serious societal problem.
Tell me, you made an interesting comment. Why are people scared of old people?
Well, I think that there's this narrative that old is bad. Even when we talk about something needing replacement, we'll say, like, I have an old car, it needs replacement, or that's an old school, it needs to be replaced. But I want to think of it differently, of thinking of that next birthday being celebrated. When you hit that next milestone, we should be proud of it. We shouldn't be making fun of people as they grow older, and we should be valuing people and even valuing ourselves as we get older, and not kind of hiding or trying to lie about our age, actually accepting who we are. And I think it'll change our perception. And my belief is, if we're ageist about ourselves or ageist about society generally, we will prioritize the needs of younger people over old people.
But generally speaking, the overall population is getting older.
Absolutely. And I think this as we age and we see the demographic shift, there's still this kind of ageism going around. And so some examples are people will say terms like, if you can't remember what you're going to say, someone will say, I'm having a senior moment. Our daughter, when she couldn't find her keys the other day, she didn't say she was having a junior moment. So
she actually used that phrase.
Yes, right. So even the suggestion that old people forget things, well, actually, you know what? That thing that you don't remember what you had for lunch yesterday doesn't even matter. What your son-in-law told you, okay, you know what? It's okay. We can forget some things. And generally, your intelligence does not change with age. And the things you can't remember usually aren't that important. It's when you actually have dementia, that's serious stuff. But generally, our brains fill up at some point. We have so many files in our brain, if you think of it that way, and we can't cull and thin our files so much. So you do kind of forget some things, or because you use up all that space. Another thing we do is we like to think of people looking a certain way. And especially and Peter, you would know this, being in the business you were in, in publications. You look at who's on the front cover of magazines. I always look at that at the checkout counter, the grocery store, and think, how many seniors are on those covers? And luckily, we've seen more and more. But you start thinking about how someone appears. So you'll hear an expression, Peter, I might say this to you, I haven't seen you for a while, Peter, you look good for your age. Your response is probably going to be, thank you, Dan. But I would like you, Peter, when someone says you look good for your age, I would prefer if you said this. Say, you look good for your age too. And the other one you could say is another one you could say is, well, how did you expect someone of my age to look? I'm going to give you one more thought also about this kind of ageism approach, that it's still acceptable. Can you learn things at any age? You can teach an old dog new tricks. So I think we have to think about, how are we even accepting people being ageist towards us? And there's another word, is still. He still drives, he still goes to work, well, of course he does all those things. He's Peter Legge. Peter Legge you'll always do those things. So the still suggests that at some age you stop doing things. So we need to rethink this. And my belief again is that we allocate resources and make priorities based on how we value people. And we should be valuing someone who's 90 as much as someone who's 9.
And I think just to jump in there, I mean, I think generally as a society, we tend to judge people by their age, and we make assumptions. And just as Dan's saying, those are assumptions. And we're being ageist anytime we assign a value to someone based on how old they are or how old we think they are, and attributing capacity or incapacity to someone because of their age. You bring up that you look good for your age. I prefer you just say you look good. Forget your age part of it, right? And we also are all of us are ageist. And I think it's embedded in us from the time we were very, very young. And we start, and I hear from my clients all the time, as they're blaming. It's this blame thing. They're blaming whatever illness or whatever they have on their age, when it's not necessarily related to age at all. So I think we need to really be conscious ourselves of how ageist we are.
Yeah, I don't feel that much older today, 10 years later, than I did 10 years ago.
Exactly. So, so how does this kind of impact society? You start thinking about this. So during COVID, we saw, if you remember the beginning of COVID, when you heard about, before it landed in British Columbia, you heard about maybe in Italy or in New Rochelle outside of New York City, you heard that the hospitals are being inundated with these people with this mysterious disease, and they need ventilators. But who's going to get the ventilator? And they actually didn't give it to old people. They gave it to younger people because they thought they had a better chance of survival. You think about how did we treat people living in nursing homes? They didn't have the same rights as the rest of us who were living outside. You think about even right now, there's pressure on seniors to sell their house to make room for younger people to buy that house and to move into retirement, or in some cases, pressure from children not to sell the house because they don't want that asset, that family asset, to be spent down as they move into a retirement home. But it's really the older people's resource. Another thing we see is people when they turn 65 and continue working, and we're going to need people to continue working, especially with the demographic inverted pyramid that we have, where younger people are going to need to continue working probably past 65 to pay off debt and to get ahead, if you will. But when you turn 65 and you continue working, you lose benefits. So you think about it, long-term disability is usually lost if you even had it. Pension, you no longer get your pension payment necessarily, and you might lose, say, your life insurance coverage. So that's all age discrimination. And even though we eliminated the retirement age in most jurisdictions, you lose benefits. There's also this suggestion around that all seniors are the same. That if you look at a senior, it's a homogeneous group, and I would argue completely against that. If they're a heterogeneous group of people, and I would say this: if you've met one 80-year-old, you've met one 80-year-old.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, we all age differently, and it's a highly individual experience for everyone. And it's really not possible to sort of generalize.
Yeah. So what's your recommendation, Leanna, to deal with that?
So in addressing ageism?
Yeah.
Well, I think the first thing is awareness. You need to become aware, even internally, your own ageism. And that to me is one of the primary things. And the way to do that is, of course, is to educate yourself, to learn about ageism. And there's little exercises that you could do just on your own. For instance, if you just for a second write down the 5 things you first think about when you think of somebody that's older, and think about how many of those are positive and how many of those are negative. Or look at your relationships, your friends, no matter what age you are, how many of them are your own age group, and how many of them are more diverse? How many of them are from other ages? Your intergenerational, which is really important. And I think one real important way to really learn about ageism and become aware of it is, I would say, take a week and pay attention to the TV programs that you watch, to the ads on TV, to the movies you watch, and start to write down how older people are characterized, how they're portrayed in those movies and in those ads, etc. And that, I think, you will become really aware about how ageist we are, and how implicit it is in our society.
So repeat again if I misheard you. What can we do about that?
And again, as I say, educate yourself and call out ageism. Challenge people when they make the kinds of remarks that Dan was commenting about earlier, right? You know, are you still working? You know, that kind of question is, why would you ask that? Or you shouldn't be wearing that. You're too old to be wearing that. You can comment it, what do you mean by that? Those kinds of things. Or again, back to, you look good for your age. What do you mean? Challenge people. You know, make them stop and think. I think by putting the question back to them when you say, when they ask you, you know, oh, you're still working? And that still, as Dan said, is the real key word there. Still, put it back to them and say, what do you mean by that? Make them stop and think about it, and think about that question, so that they then become aware, maybe that's not correct.
That's very good suggestions.
Ageism is as we're talking about it, and as Leanore is describing, it's the last acceptable ism. I mean, there are other isms too that we got to combat that we haven't really talked about as a society. But when we talk about ageism, you think about another group protected under their human rights code being made fun of this way, the audience would not be laughing. So let me give you some examples of where I think we should be really pushing the envelope on this and changing as much as possible. And a lot of it is consumer habits. So if you go into some stores, you'll see an anti-aging section. And some of these stores, I looked online, one of them sells 260 products that are under the anti-aging category. You can wash that gray right out of your hair. What if we had on a side of that packaging, and I'm being serious about this, what if it said on the side of the packaging for those products, this may make you look younger, but it will not change your birth year. You are still the same age. And on the aisle over next to it, which really irks me, is there are greeting cards. So these birthday cards, they're all positive up till about the age of 29. You know, you have the sweet 16, you turn 19, you should get certain privileges in Canada, at 21 in the United States. But at 30, things start to change a little bit and shift. They're not so positive. And there's even, the over the hill cards, right? And then you see the humor section. And in the humor section, they're making fun of old people's body parts sagging. They're making fun of old people not being able to be intimate anymore. They're making fun of people not being able to get off the sofa fast enough, not being mobile. They're making fun of memory problems. mean, imagine doing that to any other group of people that are protected under the Human Rights Code, and these stores are selling them because people are buying them for their so-called friends. We got to stop buying. And you're going to listen to me say, Dan, you got to have a sense of humor. As a gerontologist, you should know this should be okay. But really, if we're really going to embrace aging, and we're thinking of the baby boomers, and we're thinking of society, how do we then embrace our own and accepting our own aging? I mean, I think that's the critical thing, is to stop making fun of old people and accept them for who they are. And I think that's going to change society in a big way.
I think, yeah, I want to bring up the fact that there are some real serious implications with regards to ageism and its connection to elder abuse.
Yes.
And what we're seeing here, I mean, different forms of it. Certainly clients coming in, they're being turned down in housing. And we know what the housing crisis is like right now. And when they're applying for housing, they're not getting responded to. As soon as they know the age, they don't even respond. I had a client say the other day that he responded to an ad for housing when he went to visit. The guy just took one look at him and said, no, we don't want ambulances coming to our building. Then this is happening very frequently. So then what happens is we're forcing older people to go into the 55+ buildings, where they are accepted, and segregating them from the rest of society in that way. We hear of discrimination certainly about work. Many older adults, as Dan has said, want to work, would like to continue to work. Many lost their jobs or were laid off during COVID, and now they want to get back to work and they can't. And they are hiring younger people. They're not getting the jobs. And again, this indication is that they can't learn, they're too old, etc. And even worse in that, we do see it in families. We do see attitudes that families have towards their parents. Dan alluded to some about selling their house or not selling their house. And this idea that as you get older, you're incapable now. You can't make your own decisions. You can't manage your own money. I will take care of you. And we have a client, I had a call just the other day from a lady, and she's been living in the basement of her daughter's house for a number of years. She pays rent to her daughter, and gradually her daughter has started to take over management of her finances. She's telling her mom, well, you shouldn't be buying that. You don't need that anymore. You don't need that at your age. And I'll manage it for you because you're not making good decisions. And over time, it is at the point where this lady doesn't even know how much rent she's paying her daughter. She doesn't know what's going into her bank account. The daughter is doing it online. Her mother said, can you teach me? I can do it myself. She said, no, you won't be able to learn that, Mom. I'll manage it for you. And the reason she called us is because her daughter now wants her to sign over power of attorney. So this is abuse, and abuse based on the idea that her mother is no longer capable of making these decisions, when in fact she seems totally capable.
So what can her mother do about this?
Well, what we have, and in most instances, and Dan can probably confirm this, they won't do much. They won't do anything. And partly because maybe they won't be listened to, they won't be believed, or because it's their son or daughter, they're not willing to do anything about it. I have given her the resources of where she can go to report, and certainly to not sign that power of attorney unless that's something she really wants to do and gets advice on.
Is this pretty prevalent?
We see a lot, yes.
Elder abuse can be in different forms. It can be physical, it can be emotional, psychological, it can be sexual, it can be financial, and it can include mistreatment, neglect, self-neglect. Many seniors are more vulnerable because they're dependent on other people. And seniors also may experience a disability. They may be poor health. They may have a cognitive impairment, maybe poor mental health, and be on low income. And then they're at much more greater risk than the rest of the population at that kind of abuse. So, and it's also that, that ageism piece, having a view of older people being less valued, and now they're more vulnerable. It may seem to be acceptable to other people that this is happening, but it is abuse. And so our job really is to ensure that seniors are connected with their communities. They know who to call to get assistance, to ask a friend, to ask someone they can rely on if what's happening is right, or if something should be done. And that's where I think contacting organizations that are out there that are supporting seniors and trying to direct them to getting supports they need, so that they can get somebody out of a situation where they're experiencing elder abuse.
Can either of you pinpoint the age this happens?
Well, it generally happens, as you get older. Elder abuse usually, our definition in our office at the Seniors Advocate is 65. So we would say anybody over 65 that is subject to that is that's elder abuse. But you can also have people who are being abused who are under 65. So, but really, it's people who are elder, and particularly as you get older and you're more vulnerable, maybe you have some form of cognitive impairment, or you're reliant on others. That's really when it starts to happen, when somebody is helping you with your finances, or just if you are if you receive a phone call or through the internet, you might receive something, and then all of a sudden they ask you to give money. You think it's your grandson, but it's somebody else impersonating your grandson. Bam, you've lost your money. And there's a movie out currently called Thelma, which talks about and that's kind of situation. And in the movie, in the Hollywood version, she takes revenge on this perpetrator. But usually these people are doing it from a foreign country, and you never see that money again.
I think also one of the key things is there are a lot of older adults that become isolated. And I think once you become isolated, it's much easier to be targeted that way by either strangers or neighbors, or even other people in the same building where you live. So it is, as Dan says, staying connected with your community as much as possible and reaching out. I think, again, I go back to education and awareness not just of ageism, but elder abuse generally. And the BC Community Response Network goes in, and they have speakers that'll come in and they'll talk to you about ageism. They'll talk to you about elder abuse. And if you have an organization, or if you are part of a church group or company, I think it really would be valuable to invite them to come in and to speak to you about it, to learn about it, and identify the signs so that you can recognize it. Even if you're a neighbor, you see that this is happening, something isn't right. So I think education and awareness is really, really important.
Wow, this is a big issue.
Yeah, in our office, the Seniors Advocate, we did a report in 2021 about abuse and neglect, and we called on the province to have a more coordinated system, similar to what we have for child protection concerns. And we want to see a system where there's one phone number that's well known province-wide that people can call if they're concerned about a senior. And the report also recommended a central tracking and reporting system to better understand the patterns over time, so we can have a better intervention program. And unfortunately, government has not acted on these recommendations, but I am optimistic in the future we'll see a better coordinated approach to supporting seniors who are facing elder abuse.
Now, I know we've talked a little about this, but tell me again what the age is this begins.
Well, it's generally at 65 where we would see this, but it's really people as they get older and where they become more vulnerable, when they're more dependent on others. Maybe when they have some kind of mental incapacity, where they're more dependent on others to support them, and certainly physical. And you start thinking about if you're not managing your own finances, someone else is doing it. You're certainly subject, more likely to be abused. And also if you're living alone. And you're more isolated, you might have self-neglect, which is also a serious issue.
And I think, yeah, I mean, I like go back to the attitudes again, and I think because people that have attitudes and real negative attitudes about aging are probably more likely to be actually abusing their parents or relatives or friends. And it's almost like if you have those attitudes about aging, that it's an excuse, it's the reason that you can abuse them. And they manage to get away with it again, because most older adults will not report. And again, Dan can probably confirm this, but it's probably, I don't know what percentage would not be reported, but far less than any other kind of abuse. Elder abuse is less reported for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is a problem. Financial abuse of seniors, we hear about it often. Older adults are targeted by scammers because they believe older people have lots of money. They may be more trusting, certainly more isolated. But financial scam can be devastating to a senior. Not only does it hurt emotionally because you fell for a scam, but also they many seniors are on limited income, and shelling out some of their savings, you can't really get it back. So we actually have seen a 58% increase in cases of fraud reported to the RCMP in British Columbia by seniors over the past 5 years. And we released that in our monitoring report. So we're seeing more and more cases of this as people are getting desperate. And unfortunately, seniors are the victim of those elder abuse scams.
Now, when you talk about the elder, give me an idea of the age.
Oh my God.
65 is the age that we're looking at. But if you really think about this, it's really 75, 85. That's where we're seeing people being more vulnerable because they are more isolated. They may have more cognitive impairments. I think just for the audience, I think we can look at this is with this, again, coming back to who are we targeting? Who are the people? What are perceptions of older people? I think it's really important to increase awareness and to embrace aging and be positive about it, and to normalize aging. So just think about this. Again, Peter, you think about you're in the magazine business and the publication business. You look at who's on the cover of those magazines, and I'm pleased to see that it's July of 2024. German Vogue has a 102-year-old on the cover. Happens to be a Holocaust survivor, which is a whole nother story. But 102-year-olds on the cover of German Vogue magazine. In 2020, Dame Judi Dench was on the cover of British Vogue magazine. Usually, Kate Moss was on the cover of British Vogue last year. On Philippines Vogue magazine, we saw a 106-year-old person. So seniors are much more out there. Think about the fashion industry. She passed away not that long ago, but Iris Apfel, when she celebrated her 100th birthday, launched a clothing line with H&M. So as we showcase seniors, we put them out there, we kind of normalize aging. Hopefully it'll put a positive viewpoint about older people, and they won't be seen so much as being the victim. So our policies, our laws, we need to address discrimination, look at the inequities that seniors are facing based on their age, and so that everyone, regardless of your birth year, is treated well. So we got to do, as Leanore was mentioning, do education, dispel the myths around aging, and reduce our prejudices and our misconceptions.
And one way to do that, Peter, is another way to do that, I think, is intergenerational events, getting older people and people of all ages together around the table. Let me give you an example, if I may, from my own office. I work with colleagues here. We're a very small office. I work with colleagues that are 70, 60, 50, 40, 30, and 20. I don't sense any kind of difference between age. When we're working, it's what you bring to the table. It's your abilities, it's your talents. Nobody even brings age up. It's got nothing to do with it. It's not a factor. And I think we have to see more and more of that. We have to see companies sort of look at their hiring practices and recruitment practices, those kinds of things. I think, and any organization, I think, that has that kind of span of ages at the table is far better off. And far more beneficial than that discrimination.
That's very good, by the way. Now, how prevalent is this in our society?
It's very prevalent in society. Ageism and elder abuse, and unfortunately, elder abuse is increasing. But when we think about ageism, also, you can think about as Leanore was saying, in the workplace. People who are younger report more age discrimination than older people in the workplace, because they're trying to move up, if you will. You're trying to get that first job, and sometimes they don't get hired because of their age, or they don't get promotions, or they have less benefits or wages based on their age. But then you have, it's very common now in the workplace, we have these policies. We call them diversity, equity, inclusion, sometimes belonging. And we talk about those groups of people. We don't often think about the age piece. But as Leanore was saying, if we can have diversity in the workplace and it reflects society, it's much more robust if you have younger people, older people, and middle-aged people, and everyone from that lens working together. Now, as a on a personal basis, I'm a long-distance runner. And when I went to my doctor recently with a knee injury, I asked my doctor, I said, "What's the cause of this knee injury?" And he says, "Well, you're not as young as you're used to be." And I said, "Hang on." I said to my doctor, "Well, if my right knee's injured, my left knee is the same age. Why isn't it injured too?" And then as a runner, I'm also really excited.
How did he answer that, though?
Sorry?
How did he answer that?
Oh, he laughed, and he says he laughed, and he says, "Dan, you're right. You caught me there." And then, the other thing I just mentioned as a runner is I just turned 55, so I get excited about my next age category, because I can perhaps do better now in my age category than in my last age category, where I was on the older side. So just having this different way of thinking about aging and about old people and about society, and then protecting and valuing older people, like we hear about other cultures doing, I think that will help to change this whole dialogue and whole conversation. And I think it'll make the kind of thing that where maybe was on the margins and the gray area, if you will, around elder abuse, it will know they're wrong. One final example I just want to mention around elder abuse. One of my first examples, I was a new administrator at a care home working, and one of the families wanted to see me, family member. He was in dispute about the power of attorney for his aunt, which already had some red flags. And then I said, "So what's your concern today?" And he says, "Well, my aunt is now getting her hair done more frequently than she used to." And I was like, "Why is that a concern? Because don't you want your aunt to look great?" He says, "Well, she's spending more money." I said, "Whose money is it?" "Hers." I said, "I would love to see her get her hair done every day." "Well, then she'll deplete her assets." I said, "Well, she will look wonderful. You love your aunt." I asked him to leave my office, and I went right away to see the hairdresser. I said, "Please make sure," I can't remember her name, we'll call her Mrs. Smith. I said, "Make sure Mrs. Smith gets her hair done every single day. And when she runs out of money, we'll find other money to pay for it. But I want her to get her hair done." And I never saw that guy again. And so that's the kind of thing we should be doing, is making sure seniors are enjoying their money, feeling good about it, and enjoying life. If they want to buy other people things, great, but they should do it because they want to do it, not because somebody else is influencing them.
That's a good story. Leanore, in closing, one word from you.
Oh, wow. I guess, again, I would just repeat, I think when you see or hear ageist remarks, call it out, and educate yourself and help educate other people as well. That awareness, again, is a really, really important factor.
This has been a very, very interesting half hour. And I really appreciate your wisdom, and I appreciate you've probably studied this and have come across it far more frequently than my wife and I or friends of ours. So thank you so much for being here this morning. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your wisdom. I muchly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And this podcast is recognized as sponsored by the BC Association of Community Response Networks. And we're thankful for them to making this possible for everyone to listen to. Thank you so much.